Hi there. Everything I discuss in this video is public information. You yourself can find on public records. I will not be supplying a source, nor will I be supplying where I got this information from. You can either take my word from it or not. It is up to you. I will describe Furina's kit to the best of my ability, as well as the position I think she will hold in the meta. You can take my word for it there as well. Gameplay will be unrelated, and no images will be shown because I do not want to be sued. Alright, it is just that simple. With that all being said, if you just clicked on this video to figure out if Furina was worth pulling or not, I can confirm right here and now that yes, Furina is worth pulling. If you want to have her, go ahead and pull for her. She will be good on your account no matter what. If you would like to know more of the details, then by all means stick around and I will discuss more information about her. Furina, start with the auto attack. Very basic, very normal. You hit with sword, you do damage. Very cool, right? Well, there is a little bit of a caveat to this. You can use the auto attack or something aligned to the auto attack to swap the current Pneuma fragment you align to. For example, if you're in the open world, you'll probably see dark and light gems all around. As it turns out, some of you may or may not know this, some Fontaine characters have an alignment. For example, Neuvillette is light, Lena is dark, and Lenny is, I think, also light. When casting some of their abilities, they are able to cast down a shadow of a Pneuma or Osha fragment, and when it hits something, it can break it so long it is opposite of what it is. So for example, dark beats light beats dark. Well, Furina is unique in the regards that she has access to both light and dark, so if you're in the open world and you see a light totem, you can swap to dark and strike it, and vice versa. Same goes for enemies. Some of the mechs have an alignment, be it light or dark, and you can hit them with light if they're dark or dark if they're light and debuff them to do more damage. Thus, she will be one of the best characters to bring in, especially Fontaine-aligned Spiral Abyss, due to this fact alone. Also, her current alignment will affect her elemental skill. As for what her elemental skill does, she will be entered into the dark alignment upon taking the field. Once you cast elemental skill in the dark alignment, one thing will happen. You will summon 3 helpers. These 3 helpers are a crab, a seahorse, and an octopus, each of which will periodically do hydro damage, kind of similar to Oz, and then after a certain amount of time, they will be decast. The damage produced by these 3 helpers will be unique in the sense that they scale entirely off of hydro bonus damage, so say for example, Neuvillette's charge attack and Yelan's striking attacks. This means that Furina will be easily able to do a lot of damage because it scales not only off of raw HP, but it will also scale off hydro bonus damage as well as crit rate and crit damage. Very simple, and it can react. However, if you cast the elemental skill while in the light stage, you will do something completely different. Instead of summoning 3 men, you will only summon 1. This one will be a healer that dedicates itself to supporting the team. Hopefully all this has been easy to understand at this point, because trust me, it gets a lot more complicated. And that leads us into the elemental burst. I do not know how to describe this in layman's terms, so you're just gonna have to stick with me for a second. After casting Furina's elemental burst, you will begin to stack fanfare for 18 seconds. The way fanfare works is every time a character's HP either increases or decreases by 1%, you will get a piece of fanfare. For every stack of fanfare, you will increase damage dealt by the team by 0.16%, and you will increase every amount of healing done to the team by 0.02%. The max amount of fanfare you can have is 300 at the time of recording. However, this is at talent level 1. If you manage to get your talent level all the way to 10 for the burst, this will increase not only the damage dealt per stack of fanfare, but also the amount of healing, the eventual max being at level 10, 0.25% for damage. And if you're one of the weirdos that care about healing, then I guess you get an additional 0.1%, whoop-de-doo. For those of you that are really struggling to understand what this burst does, allow me to explain it in layman's terms. You will essentially cast your burst, it will set up a room. Upon that point happening, you will start collecting fanfare. You'll get 1 point of fanfare every time your HP goes down by 1% or goes up by 1%. The more fanfare you collect, the stronger your buffs will be. You can get a maximum of 300% HP change either up or down, which in turn means the max amount of fanfare you can get is 300%. This may sound overpowered, but there's problems with it that I'll bring up later, but first let's talk about the constellations. C1 simply raises base fanfare. Instead of starting with none, you will start with 150, and on top of that, the max fanfare is no longer 300, it's 450. This sounds really good, but it's very hard to get max fanfare, just something we'll talk about later. Furina C2 is very simple. All it does is it doubles the amount of fanfare you get, so if I lose 1% HP, I get 2 fanfare instead of 1. On top of that, every single time I exceed the limit of fanfare, Furina will gain an additional 0.04% of HP to a maximum of 140%. Again, this sounds incredibly good, but it's really not that amazing because it's very hard to get max fanfare. C3 is simply a leveling for the burst, which means more damage per percent of fanfare, whoop-de-doo. Furina C4 makes it to where for healing turret, when activating her elemental skill in her light phase, heals, she will gain 5 energy, which really helps because energy is kind of a big deal for her. Furina C5, simply an elemental skill level, which is also also very valuable because elemental skill is where most of her damage comes from. C6 is very hard to explain, so I'll pretty much do it like this. She essentially gains infusion on her auto attack, and while the infusion is activated, she will be dealing a lot of extra hydro bonus damage. On top of that, a percentage of her HP will be converted into damage on her attack, so it's very powerful. And it used to be the C2, and now it's not. I'm still pretty mad about that, but we'll get into that later. Overall, if you're going to go for constellations on Furina, it'd be best to go for C2 and then stop. C6 is incredibly overpowered. It is definitely one of the strongest C6s in the game now, but I don't think it's worth going for, especially because there's so many other constellations at C6 which are just better. But hey, if you like Furina, none of the constellations are that bad. And that is the kit. If you are just here to find out information on the kit, there it is. If you want to find out a little bit more, in my opinion, stick around. Are you still here? Good. Okay, let's talk about some downsides for Furina because there are a lot of them. First things first, it is very, very hard to collect fanfare on a team that's not designed around it. Let me explain. At the time of recording, there are not very many characters that drastically alter their HP threshold. The only two that I can think of off the top of my head are Hu Tao and Neuvillette, and that is it. This basically means that if you can't actively change the amount of HP that your current team has, it's going to be very hard to make use of Furina's elemental burst. Stacking fanfare is going to be very, very difficult. If you do have Neuvillette or Hu Tao on a team, yeah, you're going to get the first 100, maybe 200 pretty easily, but after that, you are going to have a very hard time. On top of that, the burst only lasts for 18 seconds, so if you do manage to stack a lot of fanfare, it's going to be very hard to maintain that damage for any significant period of time, so I have a very hard time thinking of ways to make Furina useful on most current teams. I'm sure this as an issue will become less apparent as more Fontanian characters come out, but as of the time of recording, this is a pretty big downside. The next big downside is weapons. She doesn't really have a lot of good options. At the time of recording, Furina's best weapon aside from her signature weapon would be Jade Cutter, which if you have it, you have it. If you don't, it sucks to suck. And Festering Desire, which most players, especially now, don't have. If you do have Festering Desire, then put it on Furina because it's one of her best weapons. It is her second best weapon at the time of recording, even beating out the Jade Cutter. If you don't have her signature weapon, the Jade Cutter or the Festering Desire, then it just sucks to suck, man. There aren't that many good options out there for you because she is such an energy-hungry character, and that's another thing I want to talk about. She is such an energy whore. You need to have a ton of energy on her if you want to keep getting her burst back off cooldown, which you really want. Thankfully, in the past beta test, they nerfed the amount of energy she needs from 70 to 60, but 60 energy is still nothing to sneeze at. That is a ton of energy to be getting on a character like Furina. Also, I have to say, I'm very confused with how her ascension scaling works, because Furina is not a DPS. She is nowhere near even close to a DPS unless you have her C6, yet for some reason her signature weapon scales off of crit damage and her ascension scales off of crit rate. However, she really wants HP and she really wants energy recharge, so now you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. It's for this reason that it might actually be best to just put her with an energy recharge or HP sands and then an energy recharge or HP goblet, depending on which one you don't pick. Furina has a ton of scaling issues, and I don't understand how or why it's supposed to work. None of this is to say she's bad, it's just for an Archon, I'd expected a lot more from Furina as a character. She's not terrible, nowhere near, she's not Dea level, and she's certainly not Dory level, it's just for an Archon, I expected a lot more from a 5-star character. There are, of course, some upsides to Furina, the main one being she's not a DPS, and as we all know, support characters typically, for the most part, scale a hell of a lot better in future content than DPSs do, because DPSs, they'll eventually be beat out, so she will only get better in the future. But at the time of recording, she can't really be used in Hu Tao Double Flame, she can't be used in any really Vate team because she doesn't apply enough Hydro fast enough, she can't really be used at any team outside of Fontanian characters, or she's just a waste of a slot because you have to get fanfare, and it's impossible to get that without her. She definitely feels like a character that would be a lot like Nahida, where Nahida was super useful on the first day and only got more useful as more characters come out, except Furina is kind of okay when she comes out, will become a hell of a lot better once more and more characters start coming out in the future. For example, Arlentina will be coming out sooner or later, probably 4.7, I think that's the current suspicion. And Furina and Arlentina will have insane synergy, so hey, you know, maybe you might be able to do that, but aside from that, I can't really think of anything off the top of my head, because as of now, the only other Fontanian characters we know of are Risley, who's coming out very soon, the Geo girl, I can't remember her name, she's coming out sooner or later, and Arlentino, and that's it. I think there's a couple people, there's a detective and the camera girl who's coming out soon, but other than that, I have no clue what Furina's gonna be good for. She's not a bad character, not at all, she's like a 7 out of 10, but still, it's very odd for an Archon to come out and not really have any dedicated, amazing support roles. I mean, me personally, I'm still gonna pull her regardless, because I like Furina as a character, and I know what's coming up, so I enjoy her, I'm going to pull her, but I just figured I'd make this video and talk a little bit about Furina, let you know what's going on with her, what her problems are, because I'm telling you, a lot of people are gonna hype this character up until she releases, and nobody's really talking about her downsides. She's still good, again, saying that for like the 5th time now. She is still a very good character, just there are some things you should probably know about. That all being said, like if you like it, dislike it if you dislike it. If you really like me, go and subscribe, but yeah, that's about it. See ya.